Are the New York Rangers in some trouble if they have to play Tampa Bay in the first round of the playoffs? We debate after a difficult 6-3 loss to the Lightning.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blueshirts fans, to episode number 1026 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Rangers dropping a difficult, 6-3 decision to the Tampa Bay Lightning, a game in which I think that final score is very, very misleading. If you didn't happen to catch this game, that being the case because the Rangers and Lightning were actually tied at 3 goals apiece with barely over 3 minutes to go. Tampa Bay got the lead on a power play and kind of poured it on a little bit after that. Concluded the night with an empty net goal. You had Braden Point just going off for 6 points on the evening, and the Rangers come up a little bit short. They still do win the season series against Tampa Bay, though, because the Rangers did win the 2 games before this one. And I see a lot of people, on social media really kind of, expressing their belief that this will be a very difficult first-round matchup for the Rangers. Now, honestly, I feel like just about any matchup is going to be difficult, not just for the Rangers, but really any team in the Eastern Conference. You look at the East this year, there's a lot of very, very good teams, a lot of teams that you could believe could go on a deep playoff run and perhaps even represent the Eastern Conference in the finals and ultimately hoist the Stanley Cup. I think there's a lot of teams that fit that description. And as we all know, the Stanley Cup playoffs do tend to be wide open. As far as the Lightning, though, being like a worst case scenario for the Rangers, look, they're going to be tough. There's no denying it. They're a fantastic team, a team with that championship pedigree. And I kind of just wanted to spend the first part of today's episode just kind of debating, like, is that truly the worst case scenario for the Rangers, in the first round? Is this the team that we ultimately do not want to play more so than any other team in the Eastern Conference? Because I see a lot of people kind of expressing that take on social media. Everybody, from beat writers to, national reporters to just fans and everything. And, it's one of those things that makes you think a little bit. And that idea that Tampa Bay could be a very, very difficult first-round matchup for the Rangers does have some merit. You've got a team that recently won 2 straight Stanley Cups. They went to the Cup Finals 3 years in a row, and their stretch of going to the finals in 3 straight years finally was snapped last year. They lost in the first round there, but it's a team with a championship pedigree, and a lot of their role players have kind of come and gone over the years, as is the case with a lot of teams around this league. But that core group for the Lightning still largely intact, and a lot of those players having, very good seasons, and guys that you certainly have to be mindful of, even the ones that aren't having great seasons. You certainly still have to be mindful of those guys when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs, because they've been there and done that, and they know what it takes to win. They know what it takes to go on a deep run and, hopefully be the last team standing. I've said this before too, and this isn't just because he went off and had an unbelievable game last night, but Braden Point scares me more than probably any opposing player in the Eastern Conference. I left out the Western Conference because I don't know if I want to put him up against, McDavid and Draisaitl and McKinnon, but I think in the Eastern Conference, there's just something about Braden Point, not just on the Lightning, the entire Eastern Conference. He scares me more than any opposing player. He just has that look and that feel that every time he's on the ice, man, it's like something big is going to happen. He's going to create a big-time scoring opportunity or score himself, and obviously he was able to do that many, many times in last night's game between the Rangers and the Lightning. And, he's one of those guys you certainly have to be very keenly aware of if you're going up against this team in a playoff series, because he is very dangerous. He's a playoff performer. And like I said, there's just something about him that just makes it feel like he's very dangerous every time that he's out there. But that's another reason to be somewhat afraid of the Lightning. I think another reason, I touched on this just a second ago, but really, you could say that about any matchup, because I don't think there's really going to be an easy out in the playoffs. I don't think there's ever really an easy out. Even when you get the odd sweep, was it really easy for the team doing the sweeping? Unless it's like Rangers Islanders from 1994, I don't think that's usually the case. You still have to battle, and you still have to grind and find a way to come out on top. But these are all reasons why, I think there is some merit to the Lightning being a potentially dangerous opponent for the Rangers. However, I'm going to do my best to try to alleviate some fears here and explain why the Rangers, I think, certainly can beat this team and why, I think if they were matched up, the Rangers ultimately would be the last team standing between these two. For starters, we can start really with what I just talked about. The fact that any team in the playoffs, any matchup is something that could go either way. We've seen teams multiple times over the years go on runs as, they used to seed them 1 through 8. We've seen 8 teams make it to the finals, 8 seeded teams. The Kings, not the year they beat the Rangers, but the other, somewhat recent cup win that they had, they were an 8 seed. They went all the way. Montreal a few years ago wouldn't have even made the playoffs if they had been in any other division, and they went to the finals. Even the year the Rangers won it, the Canucks were a 7 seed, barely a 500 team. The Oilers as an 8 seed made the finals. So, a lot of examples of that. And to me, again, you can't discount any team. Once you get in, I believe that's the case in hockey more so than any other sport. Any team that gets in at least has a shot at it. So there's that. But again, I don't know that you can really look at the Lightning and think that it's so much more, daunting to play them than it would be to play a team like, I don't know, the Bruins, the Panthers, the Maple Leafs, certainly the Canes. Rangers and Canes won't play each other in the first round. Rangers won't play a lot of those teams in the first round. But honestly, would you feel any more at ease playing one of those teams that I just mentioned than you would against the Lightning? So you're going to have to beat good teams if you want to win the Stanley Cup. And, the Rangers' path to the Cup this year, that's not going to be any exception to that rule. I think something else that I got to point out here is that it feels like the Ranger fans rather, are feeling this way right now today because the Rangers basically got, kind of smacked at the end of this game. Obviously, it was tied late in the game and the Lightning get some late goals and they go on for the win. And the other thing that I think kind of adds to that is it felt like the Rangers were in total control of this game, not just because they were up 2-0, but that first period was fairly dominant for the Rangers. They defended very well. I want to say Tampa only had about 5 shots on goal in that first period. And so, the way that game was going, you'd find it very difficult to believe that the Rangers would ultimately go on to lose the game by 3 goals. The way that this game started and really the way it went through at least portions of the second period as well. So there's that, but it wasn't also that long ago. Think about this, where I saw some Ranger fans on social media saying, oh man, I want no part of the Detroit Red Wings in the first round. Because for a while there, the Red Wings were, on the inside of the playoffs, that they were one of the top 8 teams and they were in one of those 2 wild card spots there. And obviously that means that the Rangers could end up playing them in the first round. And there were people that were scared of the Red Wings. They play with great pace and they've got a lot of different, offensive threats on that team as well. Well, look what's happened to the Red Wings recently. They all of a sudden have lost 7 straight games. They are now on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. And even if they kind of work their way back up and squeak their way into the playoffs and play the Rangers, I mean, does anybody really feel like the Red Wings are as daunting of a challenge as you might have felt, say, 2 to 3 weeks ago? Probably not. Now, it's a little bit different, obviously. This Detroit team hasn't been in the playoffs in a while. Tampa is a team that has done a lot of winning. Again, the multiple Stanley Cups in recent history. So it's a little bit different, but this stuff can change, on a weekly, maybe even a daily basis where you have a certain team that, you're really afraid of and they look really dangerous. And then a week or so later, it's like, they don't really look so big and bad anymore. So something like that could be the case with the Lightning as well. Again, I think every team in the playoffs is dangerous, but the idea that, oh my God, the Rangers are in so much trouble if they play the Lightning, I just don't see it. It'll be a great series. I think we know the Rangers won't win it in any fewer than 6 games because they never do that. But the other thing that I want to throw out there to kind of, again, alleviate some concerns about this and kind of, have a counterpoint to some of the, panicking that I saw on social media as far as the idea of the Rangers playing the Lightning. The Rangers have done pretty well against the Lightning in recent history. Now, obviously, 2 years ago in the playoffs, we all know what happened. Rangers get to the Eastern Conference Finals. They win the first 2 games. They then lose 4 straight games. And of course, the playoffs in general, a whole different monster than the regular season. I should acknowledge that before I say what I'm about to say here. But consider what has happened between the Rangers and the Lightning since that 6-game playoff series a couple of years ago in the conference finals. You've got a situation where the Rangers have done very well against the Lightning, and to just go through the games that have happened once again since that Eastern Conference final matchup, this is what's happened in the 6 games since then, obviously all in the regular season. Rangers won 3-1, Tampa won 2-1, Rangers won 6-3. Now, all those games were in the 2022-2023 season, so last season. And then this year, The Rangers won 5-1. The Rangers won 3-1. And then, of course, in this game, the Rangers, or the Lightning rather, winning 6-3 in a game that was obviously much, much more competitive than that final score. So the Rangers have gone 4-2 against the Lightning since that playoff series a few years ago, including 2-1 this year. Coming into the season, you tell me the Rangers can go 2-1 against the Lightning in the playoff or in the regular season. I'll certainly take that. That's a solid showing against a very good team and a team that, as we know, has that championship pedigree. I don't think that the Rangers, if they go up against the Lightning, are matched up against a team that they can't possibly beat, that they're going to be like deer in the headlights or anything like that. They go toe-to-toe with this team every single time. And when you look at the regular season results from the last couple of years, all these games, or at least the 2 games that the Lightning won, very clearly could have gone the Rangers' way. The Rangers are 4-2 against them. Couple breaks this way or that way, bounce of the puck one way or another, and maybe the Rangers are 6-0 against this team. Because again, this game last night, very competitive up until the end. Tampa won it in crunch time. Props to them for that. The loss that the Rangers had to the Lightning last year was only by a score of 2-1. Obviously, that game could have gone either way as well. But again, I just don't know that the Rangers are going to be like completely overmatched against this team. They go toe-to-toe with them in every aspect, including the extracurriculars and all the things that happen after the whistle, because there is clearly no love lost between these teams. We saw many examples of that in this game, a lot of skirmishes after the whistle and whatnot. And one of the biggest reasons why I'm not certainly terrified of this Lightning team, the goalie matchup. Think about over the last handful of seasons here, Igor and Vasilevsky largely considered 2 of the truly elite goalies in the game. At times, maybe even it's kind of 1 and 1A, where they're the 2 best goalies in the league. And now think about some of the struggles that Igor Shesterkin has had this season, because he was really up against it more so than we've ever seen him throughout his NHL career. Even with that being the case, Igor still has Vasilevsky beat in goals against average by a fairly good margin, 2.60 to 2.96. He's also got him beat in save percentage, 912 to 896. And even after last night, he's got 28 wins to 23 for Vasilevsky. And Igor has played 4 more games than Vasilevsky, but even so, Igor having a better season than Vasilevsky. Now, of course, both those guys, I think, are capable of better than this, and we'll see how that matchup plays out in the playoffs. But I do think if you take the last handful of seasons, you look at the total body of work, I think Igor is the superior goalie, and I do think Igor, he's played very well. Even in this game, there weren't really any soft goals, I wouldn't say. And there's nothing overly concerning there. And he's obviously played very well before that with the back-to-back shutouts. So I think he'll be ready to go come playoff time. And I think the Rangers will have the edge in net against basically any team, but also even against Tampa Bay and even against Andrei Vasilevsky. So we're keeping everything rolling just a second here. I want to kind of debunk another myth where there's people saying the Rangers are better without Jacob Trouba. I just don't agree with that at all. We're going to talk about that. Also get into a couple of other things as well, including Jack Roslovic continuing to make a solid impression on the Rangers, some other things as well. But first, definitely want to go ahead and let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, we also would like to let everybody know that, of course, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. Baseball fans, mark your calendar for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, be the first to get local insight from the MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. A couple other things we wanted to get into today for sure. For the everydayers, though, let me say that we're going to be back here with a couple more episodes. Obviously, we do 5 episodes every week, but the next 2 are going to focus on the 2 games that the Rangers will be playing this weekend. They play at the Penguins on Saturday at 3, and then they are home against the Islanders on Sunday at 1. And the plan right now is to do 2 separate episodes for each of those 2 games. Obviously, crunch time for the Rangers, playing some Metro Division opponents that are going to be desperate for some wins. And we'll see how it all shakes out. And we'll be back here to talk about whatever happens in those games. For right now, let's go ahead and kind of debunk another myth here, that being that the Rangers are better without Jacob Trouba in the lineup. When things go really, really well for a team and that team just so happens to be missing somebody due to an injury, I think there's a tendency, and not even just in hockey and not even just with the Rangers, but there's a tendency to just kind of write off that player and just say, oh, well, they don't even need him, or they're actually better without him. And I know that even after this loss last night, the Rangers are 3-1 since Jacob Trouba had to sit out with an injury. And, he's obviously missed a handful of games here, but people were already starting to make that claim after one Ranger win, following the Jacob Trouba loss. And it's not even like this is the first time we've heard something like this season. We saw Adam Fox get injured early in the season, and he had to miss, about 3 weeks there. He basically missed almost the entire month of November, played the first game in November and the last game in November for that month and missed everything in between. But there were people saying that was like, oh, the Rangers, is Adam Fox overrated? Are they better off without him? And I just don't see how that could possibly be the case. And I don't see how that could be the case with Jacob Trouba right now either. You could play well in the absence of someone. And I think what's probably more likely happening here, same thing with Trouba right now as what we saw with Adam Fox earlier in the season. It's a little bit of a gut check time for the other defensemen. It's a little bit of a call to arms for the other defensemen. And these guys are going out there and embracing that challenge. Now, of course, last night's game notwithstanding, the Rangers, between their goalies and obviously the defensemen as well, playing just outstanding defense. And, one thing that I'll throw out there is I do feel like this is maybe the best group of defensemen that the Rangers have had in quite some time. I think we need to embrace the fact and be happy about the fact that Adam Fox can get knocked out of the lineup. Jacob Trouba can get knocked out of the lineup, and the Rangers can still not only keep the ship from sinking, but they can keep playing very, very well. And in some ways, maybe that inspires the other defensemen, like I said, to step up a little bit. We've seen multiple examples of that. And again, I just think that that's far more likely than, the idea that some people float around that Jacob Trouba is killing the Rangers every time he's on the ice, or that Adam Fox is overrated and the Rangers don't actually need him. Those kind of ideas just don't really carry any water for me. And again, I do think that it just goes to show how fortunate we are and how happy we should be that the Rangers have good defensemen, have depth at defensemen, better depth right now than they've probably had in a really, really long time. We had Peter Laviolette heaping praise on Zach Jones not too long ago. And, he's played very well in Jacob Trouba's absence. And Jones, just continues to do whatever the Rangers ask of him. But I ask you this question. When is the last time the Rangers had a 7th defenseman who was as good as Adam Jones, who you feel is good about being in the lineup as Adam Jones? It's probably been a while. If you want to look at the third pairing, you've got, for most games, it's Gustafsson and Schneider. When's the last time the Rangers have had a third pairing as effective as that? You could maybe make a case for Schneider and Mika last year. Kind of depends what you're looking for from that 6th defenseman. But for the most part, again, I feel like this is about as good as of a defenseman group as we've seen. And, I don't also want to do an overcorrection. I don't want to go in the other extreme and look at this right now and say, well, if the Rangers had Jacob Trouba for this game, they would have won it 3-1 instead of losing at 6-3. I don't think that's the case either. I don't think he would have made that much of a difference, but he's an important player. He's had a solid season for the Rangers thus far. He is the team leader. He holds guys accountable by, everything that people say about him. He establishes a physical tone more often than not. And when you look at just this era of Ranger hockey, if you will, the last handful of years, all the players that they've, either brought in via free agency or via trade or guys that they've developed themselves, this, basically, I would say, I guess, post David Quinn era of hockey, or even maybe even in the middle of David Quinn's tenure, you could start it there. But the Rangers, for the most part, have been a successful team. And I know we won the Stanley Cup and we won deep playoff runs and all that good stuff. And of course, last year's season ended in miserable fashion. But for the most part, since Jacob Trouba has been there and since he's established himself as one of the leaders of the locker room, basically the leader of the locker room, this has been a very successful era of Ranger hockey. They had to go through that rebuild. They came out of it. You look at their record, they are clearly one of the better teams in the league this season. I think they were last year as well. Like I said, it was just a disastrous ending to the season. But that's all happened under the watch of Jacob Trouba. And I know Trouba only became the captain last year, but even before that, the year before, where they didn't have a captain, they made it to the Eastern Conference Final. By all accounts in that locker room, they all said, Trouba, they kind of looked at him as kind of the unofficial captain, regardless of whether the C was on his jersey or not. So bottom line, I do think that, you can critique Jacob Trouba from time to time, and there's been times we've done that on this podcast, but to suggest that the Rangers are like this infinitely better team without him, I don't see that either. And I got to say, I do feel for Zach Jones because I think he's played very well. He made a really nice play in this game where, he stole the puck in the neutral zone and went in and had a good opportunity to score, wasn't able to do so, but I do think he's played very well. It's nice that the Rangers are deeper, like I said, at defenseman than they've been in quite some time. And I feel for Zach Jones because I do feel like when Trouba comes back, he's once again going to be the odd man out. And that's really unfortunate. But to me, going down the stretch here, certainly into the playoffs, the Rangers need their captain. And honestly, you look at just two stats. I mean, it goes well beyond this, why the Rangers need Trouba. But you look at the fact that this guy has 170 block shots and 164 hits. I think that alone tells you, the kind of hockey that he's willing to go out there and play, the kind of tone that he tends to set. And with that being the case, I mean, those numbers alone, you should respect Jacob Trouba for those numbers alone, if nothing else. And again, has he had bad games? Yes. Has he had bad stretches? Yes. Are there times where you can critique things that he does? Are there times where you can maybe nitpick his salary? Because everybody does that. The salary cap is so tight. And, we're all salary cap experts now because of it. Yeah, you can do all those things. But Jacob Trouba, again, very, very important player for this Ranger team. And I am looking forward to him getting back in the lineup. Like I said, it might be a blessing in disguise that he's going to sit for some games here because he does play such a physical style and he'll be fresh and ready to go come playoff time. But I just fail to see any way possible that this team is actually better when Jacob Trouba is out of the lineup. More likely than not, guys are just stepping up in his absence. So, yep, that's kind of my thoughts on Jacob Trouba. And like I said, I am looking forward to him getting back out there. We're going to keep everything rolling in just a second. I want to talk about, the Rangers kind of came out of this game beat up. I want to talk about that. And I certainly want to talk about Jack Roslovic, who continues to make, favorable impressions on the Rangers and on the Ranger fans. He had a big game in this one, his first 2 points as a Ranger, and seems to be elevating that top line as well. And we're going to get to all that fun stuff in just a second. But first, we definitely want to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Ibotta. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Do you love making money, but also love spending money? Don't we all? Now you can make money while you spend it every time you shop with Ibotta. Spring break is around the corner, which means you're going shopping. But don't shop for your big trip and get nothing in return. Make sure you're getting cash back every time you shop with Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. So you could buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the free code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. That's Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store and use the code LOCKEDONNHL. All right, so a couple other things I want to cover here before we call it a day. Rangers were really banged up in this game. There were a lot of just little things that happened throughout the game. You had Victor Hedman slashing Artemi Panarin in the second period, and then Hedman was running his mouth after he did it. Seemingly, and Sam and Joe called this out too, seemed like maybe Hedman was a little bit mad, a little bit frustrated, whatever you want to call it, that Panarin made him look bad, basically, the previous shift that they were both out there. Basically, Panarin just stole the puck from Hedman and went in on the rush, 2-on-1 rush. Panarin tried to force a pass that probably wasn't there, and unfortunately, the Rangers didn't score, and the score stayed at 2-0 at that point. But Hedman was called for a penalty here, and Panarin was shaken up for a second, but he went right back out there, and he was fine. Mika Zibanejad sustained an injury, came back with the full face shield. Curious to see if he'll wear that one going forward. We'll see. It sounds like it makes it a little bit tougher to breathe and a little bit tougher to pick up the puck, and especially when it's down at your skates, it's harder to find the puck looking through that visor. But he had it for this game, and we'll see if he has it going forward. We also had Lafreniere. He was in some pain after he blocked a shot. Lindgren was involved in a crazy collision with Anthony Duclair. I didn't notice this live, but Duclair's stick basically popped out of his hand and went up into the stands. A lot of people were saying that, so that's pretty wild. They were kind of in a wrestling match, but Lindgren ended up, he's kind of banged up in this game as well. So we'll keep an eye on that. So far today, I'm not really noticing any updates, which leads me to believe that it can't be anything overly serious for any of these players, and that's obviously good news going forward. Look, the Rangers are running the gauntlet right now. They're not only playing a lot of games in not a lot of days, but they are doing so against some really good teams. And if not necessarily elite teams, they're playing teams or will play teams that are desperate. They're kind of either barely hanging on to a playoff spot, or they're the last team out right now and they have to try to climb the ranks to get in. So the Rangers, that's going to be a good test for them down the stretch here. Again, not only playing other elite teams, but also those teams, those bubble teams, trying to scratch and claw their way into the playoffs, including the two teams that they're going to play this weekend, the Penguins and the Islanders. The Islanders right now, they've been doing a decent amount of winning, although they have lost 2 in a row. I think they had won 6 in a row before that, maybe 7. They are the second wild card as of now. And the Penguins, I know this is going to break everybody's heart, but they continue to basically tumble. They only have 3 wins in their last 10 games. But even with all that said, they are technically only 5 points out of the playoffs, even though there's a lot of teams between them and that second wild card spot. So the bottom line, Rangers are going to be playing 2 desperate teams this weekend, and you hope that they can match that desperation and come out with hopefully all 4 points. We'll see how it goes. The other thing I want to mention here too, we got to talk about Jack Roslovic, and just a great job that he's done thus far in his tenure as the Rangers with the Rangers. It does feel like he's one of those guys that has been kind of accepted right away and embraced right away. We've seen a lot of examples of that over the past handful of seasons here. It feels like when the Rangers go out and get somebody at the deadline, they come in and they fit right in. Again, both from a style of play perspective, as well as, just a culture perspective. And it seems like Roslovic is getting along well with everybody and seems to have pretty good chemistry with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider. But Roslovic made a huge play to make the score 2-0. He got the secondary assist here, but really this goal probably doesn't happen without him. Basically, Roslovic gains the zone up the left side. He tried to go behind the back or between the legs or something. He was going toward the net and he tried to pull off something, was not quite able to do it. But the puck, I believe it deflected off of his own skate and kind of went away to the other side of the rink. But Roslovic, he tracked it down and circles back toward the blue line. Then he cuts back, toward, the corner area and holds onto the puck and then finds Mika Zibanejad behind the net. He passes off the boards to Mika Zibanejad. Mika taps out in front, and then there's Braden Schneider there on the doorstep, and he scores from point-blank range to make the score 2-0 in favor of the Rangers. And as I said, Roslovic's first point as a member of the Rangers, and something that's really standing out to me about him, we know he's fast, we know he's got some quickness. He's just a really slippery player where I feel like he's just hard to defend. I don't know. It just feels like he's able to basically stop on a dime and go this way, go that way, make all these cuts. We saw him, try to make what would have been a very impressive move on his way to the net here. He seems like one of those players that, again, has a little bit of a bag of tricks that he can go to, but also somebody that's very elusive and just very difficult to defend. And, that has been on display a couple of times, perhaps none more so than this goal scored by Braden Schneider here. Of course, he passes to Mika, and then Mika out in front to Schneider. We also saw Roslovic score his first goal as a member of the Rangers. This happened in the third period, early in the third. Tampa Bay had tied it at 2-2 at this point. And watching this game, you think that oh man, that's going to be his first game-winning goal for the Rangers. And obviously it didn't go that way, but still a fantastic play. Early in the third period, like I said, you've got Lindgren passing across the ice to Mika Zibanejad. Mika shot just wide on this play. The puck was eventually cleared, but the Rangers kind of regroup. Kreider gets in on the forecheck on the left side. He goes around the boards to Adam Fox, and then Fox kind of moving down the boards. he passes across the ice to Roslovic, and Roslovic immediately buries it to give the Rangers a 3-2 lead. Something else about Roslovic that I'll throw out there, it feels like there's something kind of tricky or deceptive about his shot. I haven't really been able to put my finger on it just yet, but maybe it's just a quick release. It just feels like he's got a distinct way of shooting that is difficult to anticipate and perhaps difficult to stop if you're an opposing goalie. Now, he does only have, I believe that was his 6th goal of the season, but even so, there's something kind of tricky and something kind of deceptive about his shot, and I think that's something to keep an eye on going forward. Hopefully, he can score goals at a higher rate on a team like the Rangers than he was able to on a team like the Columbus Blue Jackets. But figure we can pretty much call it there for today. Once again, if you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that is @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.